Welcome back to the Meaningful People podcast. I'm Yaakov Langer.
I'm Nachi Gordon.
And on this week's episode, we have a very special person. We have Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Notice that interesting name.
Yes, Jacobson is a really, really rare name, Yaakov.
Nachi, you and your jokes.
You make jokes like that when you hang around Yaakov Langer so much. That's just the type of joke you make.
Yeah. So, Nach, tell our audience a little about Rabbi Simon Jacobson.
Rabbi Simon Jacobson, born in 1956, an integral member of the Crown Heights community, the Chabad movement. He's the founder of an organization called the Meaningful Life Center and the author of a book that sold over 500,000 copies, Torah to Meaningful Life. If you haven't read it, then you're just not one of those 500,000 people, which is interesting. He's also a chayzer by the Rebbe. And if you're not sure what a chayzer is, you're going to learn so much about that in this episode.
I had no clue what a chayzer was going into this, but I got to know what it is. And I was very blown away by him. He's one of those people that are super intellectual, but also has a sense of humor and kind of gets it and is a big visionary. And he has plans for Klal Yisrael, that's for sure.
Well, he sure does. So buckle your seatbelt, folks, and enjoy the rest of this episode.
Gosh.
Welcome to the Meaningful People podcast, the podcast where we talk to people who are
meaningful.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So we are sitting here with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Simon is not a regular ordinary name that you see every day. It's not Shimon and it's not Simon.
Are you sure you're saying it properly?
I think that's the name, right?
You got it right. That's exactly right. Simon, like Simon Tov.
Like Simon Tov. Samach Yod Mem Nun.
Mem Vav Nun.
Mem Vav Nun. Okay.
I'm going to start telling people Shimon Tov.
Shimon Tov.
Oh.
But it's not Shimon Tov. It's Simon.
Wow.
And Jacobson is more of, I guess, a common last name, but Jacobashvili is not. So
I see you did your research.
We do our research, but you're gonna have to take it from here and let's delve into, for starters.
So what other skeletons in the closet have you found?
Hey, we have a little while to get to the rest of them. But let's start with the first skeleton. Simon. Where does that come from?
My grandfather was a Sephardic Jew from Georgia, Russia.
Not Atlanta, Georgia.
No, not Atlanta, Georgia. Not Georgia where the elections were determined. But rather Georgia is one of the part of the former Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. Gruzia is another name for it. So my grandfather came from a Georgian family, and he, a religious family, and his name was Simon Jacobashvili. Shvili in Georgian means son of.
Okay.
So when they made surnames, basically in the 18th and 19th century, that's when everyone got names. So actually there it was respectable. They gave you respectable names. Son of Jacob would be Jacobashvili.
Right.
So when my grandfather came to Toronto after World War II, he changed it to Jacobson. So originally Jacobashvili, so son of Jacob, Jacobson. And I'm the oldest of my father, of 5 children, the Bchar. So my grandfather had passed away in 1953. I was born in 1956. So my father, who named his firstborn, which is myself, by the name of his father, Simon Jacobson. There you go, Simon. Now, by the Sephardim, they use the name Simon. The truth is that anyone listening who is a little scholar would know in the Yerushalmi, the Talmud Yerushalmi, and in Medrash, there's a Rab Simon. He's one of the sages of the Talmudic times. His name is Rab Simon with a Samach. Yeah.
Do most people butcher your name and call you Simon?
Yeah, so I have like maybe 6 variations of my name. Seriously. We have Simon. We have Simen. It's more of a Yiddish touch. Right. We have, when my mother is more loving to me, she'll call me Simonke, with a Ke, like Simonke. Then there's Simon, Simone, and I'm even called Simmons because I give classes and I lecture and so on. So people say, "You're going to Simmons?" So people thought that's my name. It's really Simon with an apostrophe S. Simone, that's the variety.
And the name Jacobashvili, that's I guess a Russian
Georgian
descent. And your ancestors going back were Chabad, or
no? My grandfather Simon was a Georgian Jew who actually met the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, in 1918. He was on his way to Europe, and he ended up in Rostov, was the city, because during World War I he couldn't go straight to Italy, so he had to detour because of the war, and that's where he ended up in the Chabad Yeshiva, and became Chabad. And my mother's side also, I mean, most Chabad Hasidim are not necessarily born Chabad Hasidim.
Right.
Either their parents or grandparents at some point embraced it. In my case, my grandfather embraced it then. And his wife, however, my grandmother, her name was Freda, she actually comes back from a blue blood Chabad all the way back to the founder of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, Balatanya Shulchan Aruch.
It's yichus right there.
Yeah, but you know, yichus is, as they say, the cynics say yichus is like a potato. The best part lies in the earth, you know. So yichus isn't always, you know.
I like that.
Yeah, so it's really what you do with the yichus, let's put it that way.
So you mentioned Toronto before. That was your grandfather. Did you grow up in Toronto? Or?
No, my grandfather and my grandmother with their 3 children, my father was the oldest, came out after World War II, and they couldn't get into the United States. They ended up in Toronto. After my grandparents passed away in 53 and 54, my father moved, and with his 2 brothers, they were all orphans now, to New York.
And
my father met my mother in New York, in Brooklyn, and they married. And I'm the oldest of their children. I was born in 1956. I'm a baby boomer.
1956, and you grew up in Crown Heights, I imagine.
Crown Heights.
What was it like growing up in Crown Heights at that time?
Crown Heights was a very different world then. Crown Heights was primarily white, many Jews, but mostly secular Jews. Mm-hmm. You meet a lot of people, they tell you they were in Crown Heights at some point, their parents, their grandparents. So my childhood, my really young childhood, Crown Heights was beautiful. It's a beautiful community. In the early 60s, when the civil unrest began, not only in New York, but in Chicago and Cleveland and Detroit and Pittsburgh, there was a big change, civil rights movement. So the whites ran, most of the whites ran. Mm-hmm. And the only ones that remained in Crown Heights were primarily Chabad. Well, everybody else left. The prices plummeted.
Where'd they run to? Like they just ran to?
Borough Park,
Williamsburg.
Queens.
Okay, yeah.
Well, Williamsburg, had its own community. Oh, and many ran to the suburbs.
So but the Chabadnik stayed? Yeah,
because the Lubavitcher Rebbe insisted we don't run. For many reasons. He was opposed running. Didn't feel that's an approach in life that you run. And you also put other people at risk. If you run, not everybody can afford to move.
Right.
So he insisted on staying. It was very difficult in the late 60s and early 70s because real estate prices plummeted. We're talking about really, stores were boarded up. It was basically a low-income blacks that basically entered into the community.
It's sort
so you
of
can imagine many people. This happened everywhere in all the.
It's not so. History repeats itself constantly.
Downtown Chicago, downtown Cleveland, it happened everywhere. And suburbia had arisen in the 50s and the 60s, the superhighway system, but we did not. So we stayed, and then it turned around. In the 80s, especially late 80s, 90s, you go to Crown Heights now. It's completely what they like to call gentrified. It's now a top place to great food,
right?
And not just Chabad. Now you have many people. On Franklin Avenue, Eastern Parkway. It's changed dramatically. It's now a very different community. It's a destination spot. People come. So I've seen the changes. I've seen the vicissitudes, they call it, the fluctuations.
Growing up, did you personally have what to do with the Lubavitcher Rebbe?
Well, that's a good question. You didn't do your full research.
I'm asking as if I don't know, but we'll get into being a chayzer and
yeah. Firstly, I grew up. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was a dominant figure, like the king on the hill, so to speak, the Rebbe. But as a child, it's a child. What do you understand as a child? I went for a bracha. I went for my bar mitzvah. I went for my father had different occasions. We went into what's called yechidus, a private audience, and the Rebbe was that dominant, awesome figure. But I can't say I had a personal relationship with him. I didn't appreciate. In my teenage years, as I was going through my own journey, everybody's got their journey. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I like to put it that I was like a rebel without a cause. Had that rebellious personality. I did. To be perfectly honest, and I hope this doesn't sound irreverent or anything, I was a skeptic, and I challenged my own Judaism, because I saw a lot of mediocrity, I saw conformity, herd mentality. You know these words.
Yeah.
A skeptic of Yiddishkeit in general?
Just
or-
everyone following
by nature, I
along.
was a questioner. I didn't just
Right.
go along because someone said it. I had skeptics, not necessarily in a bad way. I always questioned. I didn't just go because you see everybody like looking up. You also look up. I challenged it in my own way. I was not angry. I was not abused. I wasn't molested. Just in case you want to get that out of the way.
Just check all the things. Yeah.
I was, but I was a thinking person. I grew up in a very open-minded home. So it was a very Chabad home, a very religious Jewish home. But there was also, my parents were very open-minded. My father was a journalist. So it was a lot of free inquiry. It wasn't a dogmatic home. There was no dogma. So I explored in my own way, well, there were wonderful people in my life. Beautiful, warm, fine, refined Jews, Hasidic Jews. I knew your grandfather, your great-grandfather, Rabbi Jacobson Gordon. He was the Gabbai in 770.
Yeah.
And knew him as already an older man. And then his son, Reb Nissen, and his brothers Nissen was a colleague of my father's. So just to pull a little connections here. I'm name dropping.
Of course.
But
But I'm going to get, so when my 17, 18, I was challenged by the fact, I was asking myself, is Judaism some type of mind control? Like, program?
or a cult.
I don't want to use that word.
Okay, sorry.
I don't want
Don't worry,
to
Yaakov will.
insult.
No. I'm just listen. I'm not saying it is.
Like some people say, you're not really, you're like an anti-religious guy. And I say, yeah, but some of my best friends are religious Jews. So I don't want to insult anyone. Yeah, no, I wouldn't call it a cult because I didn't see it as being destructive.
Right,
I don't
okay.
see people jumping off a mountain or drinking cyanide.
Right.
But I did sometimes feel, is this something that, you can't ask questions. They're threatened by any challenge. And it took a while for me to come through that. But I'm going to make a long story short. It was ultimately the Chassidus, the Pnimius Torah, that's called the spirituality of Judaism, that touched me deeply. It was like music. You put on tefillin, you can do it robotically. You just put it on. You keep Shabbos, eat kosher. I did it all. I grew up with all of it, but I didn't always resonate. Like I said, okay, we're doing it. I was nothing against it, but I would wonder, is this just some type of ritual, cultural thing? Because I didn't always see that everybody that was more religious was more refined. On the contrary, I sometimes find people that were so like almost OCD about the details were not necessarily nicer people. Mm-hmm. And there were some of them were nice, but I didn't see it as synonymous. You think if someone's more religious, more Shabbos, or they check every detail on Pesach, you'd think they're also more refined. That bothered me a lot, that dissonance between religiosity and what they call digdu kal shel divrei sofrim, careful in every detail, but I don't see them being careful in not hurting someone, in Avos Yisrael, for example, which is, we all know this problem. Mm-hmm. So this bothered me, but then when I came to understanding the neshama of it, that Shabbos isn't just about not doing lamates malachas, the 39. But Shabbos is about a day where introspective day, you connect to your soul, you connect to God, you connect to your purpose in life. That changed everything. Because then once you hear music, it's different. It was the music of Judaism. And then I began to appreciate Lubavitcher Rebbe. Because then I understood, till the Rebbe was talking Torah, he was talking Rashi, Zohar, Pirkei Avos, Rambam, the Rebbe's style. He was a big, great Talmud Chacham. So I appreciated his goinus, his scholarship, but the relevance, that was the big thing, the relevance. And then I began to realize, I remember the Rebbe giving a talk. It was a moment in my life. And he was talking about exactly what I was going through, the rebellion of young people. He was talking about the rebellion of the 60s. And the Rebbe said that people make a mistake. They think that the rebellion in a young person is dangerous because it's disruptive, it breaks rules, challenges the status quo. So it's dangerous to adults. So the Rebbe says, no, it's not dangerous. It's actually coming from the deepest part of the soul. He called it the fire of the neshama. That is very frustrated because it wants to change the world and doesn't know how. So if adults don't appreciate it, they should get out of the way. But if they appreciate it, they should help with their seasoning and maturity and experience, guide young people to create a spiritual revolution. That's the gist of it. Actually, in my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, I have an entire chapter inspired by that talk, which touched me. And I said, wow, this is cool. This is like a 75-year-old, a 70-year-old Hasidic rabbi. He's really with it. I knew people my own age that weren't as, let's call it, pioneering and exciting. I was excited by that. It could change the world, in a good way. And it really touched me deeply. As a matter of fact, Matisyo, the singer, when he released an album called Youth.
Yes.
He was inspired by my chapter. We were
Really?
friends. Yeah. And he sat with me. He wanted to see all the sikhs, all the Rebbe's talks on youth, from where I had derived that chapter. So it touched many people. Anyway, just to fast forward, a little while after that, I was very intrigued by the process of how the Rebbe would speak on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. No recordings and no notes. And the process of remembering, what we called chazara, remembering, chayzer. And I got involved in that little group, and I became good at it, to be very honest. So I became part of that group. And
So could you explain what exactly, meaning the Rebbe would give a speech? And
I'll tell you all the details. So let me just give a small introduction. People don't realize that all of us, all Jews, were chayzrim once. Chayzer means that repeated. Remember Torah Shabbal Peh. Why is it called Bal Peh? Because it was memorized. It wasn't written down till 1,000 years later by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. So here was the process. The Rebbe would speak, obviously sometimes in the weekdays, then there was recorded. But in the Shabbos and Yom Tov, so no recordings, no notes. So how do you preserve that? And we're not talking about a 5-minute drasha. We're talking about sometimes 6, 7, 8 hours. And especially if Yom Tov went into a Shabbos, so you could have Simchas Torah was Friday, there'd be a Farbrengen Thursday night, Friday night, Shabbos afternoon, and Shabbos late afternoon. 4 Farbrengens before you could even write down a word. Sometimes 15 hours. So, and just to make you even more, just to even show you how more challenging it was, the Rebbe's rate of speaking, when it was typed, transcribed in the weekdays, every hour of talk yielded 28.5 by 11 double-spaced pages. So 1 hour is 20 pages. 5 hours would be 100 pages. 7 hours would be 140 pages. So you'll ask how good did we do? So I can tell you that, let's say a 5-hour Farbrengen, 5 hours of speaking, with the Negunim and all that in between, we were able to remember 98 out of 100 pages without redundancy. That's how well we did it. And I'm not saying to toot my horn. I'm saying it because I can give you tips if you like.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to also ask you to repeat this conversation after.
No, the challenge is for you to repeat it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I can do it. I remember the Rebbe's words. I don't necessarily remember my own words. That's another story.
So yeah, what's a tip? How do you work on that? Just the sheer, like, this is something that I could imagine, like 2,000 years ago, this is what they used to do. I can't imagine this is like.
When you started doing this?
I already was intrigued. I was already 17, 18 when I began.
So like,
I wasn't, it took time. Took a few years. By 1979, I was 21. I became the main writer of the Rebbe's talks, because there was 2 parts to this. Mm-hmm. There was what's called a chayzer. Chayzer literally means like to chazer, to repeat.
Right.
So you're repeating what you heard. There was another word called maniach. Maniach means someone that committed to paper that which was remembered. So not everybody that could write remembered. Not everyone that remembered could write. I actually had the skill to do both. So I became the main writer and worked with a very small group of people, of individuals. And I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share some of the secrets of the trade. You
secrets. Understand how that's not a regular skill that someone could have. To sit there and listen to.
Do I look so out of touch? Of course I understand.
No, I'm just making sure, because sometimes people have this.
No. Of course I understand.
It's a gift.
No, there is no question it's a gift, but there are methods. Mm-hmm. It's not like I just stood there and and everything just went in and I was a walking tape recorder. No, I had to exert real effort. This was not automatic at all. I can tell you, weekday talks that the Rebbe gave, I don't remember. These Shabbos talks I can repeat today as it was then. So I'll share with you 1 or 2 these tips, if you wish, but an approach. And it's, as you'll see from this, interestingly and counterintuitively, it's not just about remembering. It really changes your whole way of being as a human being. To learn how to listen to people. Yeah. It can help in marriage. It can help with your children. It can help with disagreements, mediation. Wherever you turn, what I'm going to share with you now is going to be tremendously helpful. I speak about it from time to time. Mm-hmm. I develop methodologies. I've done workshops on this. And the key thing, a few key points. First of all, there's no magic pill. There's no magic trick. I'm going to tell you, press a button. I can tell you that right now. You're Gaita Matsasi. It's going to take work. But I will say this. One of the most important things to remember, people think memory is a faculty of the intellect. A smart person remembers better. Not necessarily. As a matter of fact, you'll see in a moment that smartness sometimes works against memory.
I'm never gonna have a good memory then. That's a joke, everyone. Okay,
Well,
yeah.
how smart are you?
I'm very
From
smart.
1 to 10.
20? No, I'm
Okay.
kidding.
Okay, well,
I'm not. I'm joking. That's a complete joke.
that's fine. It's fine. In every joke, there's some serious.
No, I am dumb. There's no truth there. My wife's gonna kill me for saying this. Okay, yeah, sorry.
What do you mean? You have a neshama. God gave you wisdom. How could you be dumb?
I'm not really
God
dumb.
doesn't
I'm just
create.
making a joke. I want to balance it out. True. Yeah, no.
We're going to focus on you now.
Yes,
Okay.
Yaakov, how does it make you feel? When did you first feel dumb? How old are you?
I don't really feel dumb. I don't necessarily feel intelligent. But yeah, oh gosh, this turned into like
we
I
may
need a
move to
couch.
you next.
I need a couch to lay
It's
down.
fine. It's fine. Let me get back on a serious note. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay. But it's good. This is good. Very good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you guys got a lot.
No, please challenge him. He deserves
a lock
it.
script.
Yeah, we like. I mean, we say this all the time. Our goal with these conversations is to be as comfortable as possible. It's not.
Yeah.
There's.
Well, I'm feeling very comfortable, and you guys seem comfortable. I think we're going fine.
Thank
Sure.
you.
I don't think we have to talk about that. Do we have to
Right.
talk
Well,
about? Let's
now,
be
yeah.
comfortable now.
Yeah. Well, now it's getting
You know, like they
uncomfortable
say,
talking about it.
spontaneous dancing at 9 p.m.
Right.
We're now going to be comfortable for the next 5 minutes, and then we're going to become awkward. or
Right,
something.
right.
Okay. Anyway, getting back to the point. Which, among a demographic of a population, who remembers things best? Children. The stories you heard, the songs you heard as a child, you remain etched in your psyche. Adults, we have difficulty remembering. And we start looking for all kinds of gimmicks. Now, it doesn't make sense. Why? Because children's minds are definitely less developed than adults' minds. So you think they have less memory, but they have better memories. And the reason is because memory is not intellect per se. Memory is the ability to absorb information, which is dependent on really being a very good listener, which is dependent on being humble. And let me explain. Children have their minds are like a dry sponge. A dry sponge, you know what it does. It absorbs in a moment. What does a saturated sponge do? A wet sponge? It doesn't absorb. And a child's mind is a clean slate. They never heard anything before. They have no preconceived notions. They have no prejudices. Nobody shaped them yet. So their minds are this like clean slate, a dry sponge, and whatever enters, they retain. Adults have ideas. We have notions, preconceived notions. The smarter you are, the more ideas you have. So that works against you. When you hear something new, you try to fit it into your existing framework.
It's like an empty memory card versus a full memory card. I figure, a child, it's empty. And
So here's the story. So you can imagine two wheels in the brain, two wheels in your mind. We'll call one the absorber and one is the processor. So all information needs to be absorbed and then processed. But the problem is adults process before they absorb. So even when you're listening to me right now, and you're listening, I know you're listening, you're not listening fully because that's the nature of the mind. It right away gets intrigued. Oh, he's saying something interesting. Here's my next question.
right.
Exactly.
What do you think about right now, Yaakov?
I'm thinking of asking him about his book and his organization, but exactly what you're saying. I'm trying to absorb it.
So, and there's an expression in the Gemara in Chulin about kashrus. It says, "I did the Torah lemivla lepolit." When you're busy absorbing, you can't be exuding. And when you're busy exuding, you can't be absorbing. You can't speak and listen at the same time. Now, speaking doesn't mean always in words. Your mind is racing. I say, let's say, an intriguing idea. So that right away you say, oh, that answers a question I had yesterday, or that fits into something I learned. When the Rebbe spoke, what we had to do was turn our minds into childlike absorbers. We had to shut off the processor as much as possible and just listen purely undiluted without any processing at all. Now, it's very difficult to do that, especially if you're excited about the idea, because you right away, but that was the work, was to shut that down and just listen. As a matter of fact, this is the counterintuitive point. The better I understood what the Rebbe said, the harder it was to remember in its pure form, because I remembered how I understood it, not necessarily how he said it.
So it could work against you sometimes, especially
and when I didn't understand, I actually remembered it much more accurately. And so I've developed all kinds of exercises about this. If you want, I'll share one.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm not.
Please, this is really interesting.
You're running the show, but I'll so I did an exercise that I do with people. I've done it now maybe with a few thousand people in small groups, groups of 40, 50. And here's the story. What I did was I say, here's the exercise. Take any book or sefer you like. Open it up to a page or 2 pages. The goal is read it as many times as you wish. No time limit. Then the goal is to close the book or the sefer and write down on a piece of paper what you just read.
Word for word.
No.
Whole page or
not word for word. A flow of ideas.
Okay.
I don't care about the word for word. It doesn't need to be word for word. Before we begin, I always say, so let's estimate. What do you think you're going to do? How well will you do? 0% means from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. 100 would be you got the whole thing perfect.
Word for word or just ideas?
Ideas.
Okay.
Yeah. Even ideas. Most people say around 80%. We'll do around 80%. It sounds like a nice, humble number. And then we begin. And you see the smartest ones, or the people who think they're the smartest, do it very quickly. They look at the book, they write, and then they sit and wait for the rest of the dumber ones, like that. They wait, sitting and waiting. And then after 15, 20 minutes, everyone's done. I tell everybody, give your book and what you wrote to your neighbor, let them evaluate it. Nobody gets 80% the first time around. 70, 75 is the highest. The ones who did it faster, the percentage goes down to the point that the smartest ones in the room, or the ones that thought they were smartest, sometimes write things that contradict what it says in the book. And when I say, 1 second, what's that? They say, because I didn't agree with it. So I say, but that wasn't exercise. You didn't even listen to what I said. That was an exercise whether you agree. It was to write down whatever that author wants to say, because their conviction and their firm conviction in what they believed and understood was more important than listening to what that person was writing. The second time around, everybody goes up by 20% because everybody's been humbled.
Yeah.
You always think you're smarter than you really are, and you think you're a better listener than you really are. So the second time around, everybody takes more time, more patience, a little more bittul, as they say in Chassidus, less arrogance, and take a half hour, and everybody's marks go up. So the first thing that you learn from this is don't overestimate yourself. It takes work, and to really listen well and absorb is real effort. And if you want to apply yourself, you can end up doing it. Try, anyone listening to this, try the exercise in your own home, and you'll tell me the results.
Bleed Neder, I'm going to do it with your book.
You think you could do that?
Try it.
You think you could
Could I try it? For sure. Why not?
Well, I've given you already a few tricks, but that's fine.
Right.
But you'll see. The first time you will not do as well. The second time you'll do a lot better. Once you see.
The same page. I should do the same page.
Yeah, why not? I don't mind. I could be. That's your call.
Okay.
Going with the I guess the sponge metaphor. How do you take a sponge that's saturated and full, and I guess squeeze it and empty it? Like, how do you do that?
So since we're not talking about an actual sponge, you're talking about a mind, and you're talking about willpower. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you 2 examples. Mm-hmm. When there's a judge and a jury, and they're listening to evidence and witnesses, you don't want them, if you're an honest person, to come to a conclusion because there was a persuasive witness or a persuasive piece of evidence. You want them to first absorb before they process.
Right.
So suddenly comes a witness and says, I saw him do this crime. And you're so convinced, you don't even listen. You would come to a conclusion that's not right. So there, what is an adult supposed to do? You're supposed to say to yourself, he's a very persuasive evidence, but I need to hear the rest of it. You don't allow yourself to come to a conclusion. And you wait till all the data. Same thing with research. You ever do research? You don't begin to come to conclusions before you finish the research. You want the last piece of data. And then you say, okay, now what are my conclusions? So really, it's a discipline and being honest with yourself. So you're not really you're not getting rid of the ideas in your sponge. What you're doing is not letting them influence the new idea that you're listening to right now. That's how we grow. That's why I said before, it's a secret to relationships. I tell people I counsel couples, disagreements. I said, do you even know how to listen to the other person? Let's just try that. Forget about agreeing with them. Let the woman speak. She speaks, and the husband's right away trying to cut her off. We said we're going to let her speak. She finishes speaking. I said, I'd like you to repeat what your wife said. He says, no, I don't agree with it. I said, that's not what I asked you. Just repeat. Let's just hear what she said. Respect her opinion. You don't have to agree.
Right.
And then we'll do the opposite. You know how difficult it is to get 2 people to do that? Almost impossible. They won't. They resist because they're emotionally invested. And then I do the opposite. And also, if I can break through and get them to just shut off your processor and just listen, I'm not even asking you to agree. Just here, there's another perspective on it.
Do you think we all have that issue where just in life we're just not turning off to receive?
How many people?
You know
are having
why?
real
Because we weren't trained. When we're taught, when we go to yeshiva or school, we're taught accumulate information, become a Talmid Chacham, become a Gaon, more. So we may have once in a while a good teacher, and you may be a naturally good listener, but we're not taught to do that. I learned it on the job. I learned it on the job, and I really was also, a key point is also that I respected and wanted to really learn from the Rebbe. It was important to me. Like nowadays, sometimes someone comes over to me and says, hey, they share something with me, and I'm daydreaming, and they say to me, so did you hear what I said? Did you? So I didn't really hear it. So a respectful way, this is a trick of the trade as well. I say, can you rephrase it? Which means I didn't hear a word you said.
It in a sentence.
Yeah. Anyway, they repeat that. They said, you were able to remember 7 hours of the Rebbe's talk, so you can't remember 3 minutes of mine. So I don't want to be the one that breaks it on them, that I don't hear history unfolding in their words. so it's like, I'm not gonna apply my mind to nonsense, for example. Now, God forbid I'm saying that they said nonsense, but I mean,
right. It's not. You're not always on.
So let me tell you the role of adrenaline. If right now I told you guys that in a half hour from now, or anyone listening to this, someone's going to come to speak who's going to share the most important secrets for life, for happiness, for love, for sustainable relationships, for dealing with children. And you trust me. You say, yeah, great, I'm going to, and you can't take notes and you can't record it. I trust me that your adrenaline will start going up and you're going to focus and remember a lot better than you can ever imagine.
Really?
Because the urgency of it, the urgency changes things. I'm not saying you still need a gift and you still need skills. I'm not suggesting. I'm just pointing out that urgency plays also an important role.
Yeah, but I'd be worried that that in a situation like that, I don't have those skills to be able to absorb without, there's a level of mindfulness that you need to get to.
No, I agree. I'm just pointing out that it's another ingredient in the equation. Obviously, you need the other factors as well. I can go on. I can talk hours about this, to be honest. I did this for years. I mean, I can talk about how I created a mental roadmap when the Rebbe would speak. It's like someone driving you, so you're going on the highways, going straight. Then at some point, they make a right, so you memorize. So the same thing when the Rebbe would speak, it was important to make a mental roadmap that he spoke about this idea. And when he came to, let's talk about Avraham Avinu, the Rebbe went to the right. He started talking about some other topic. So you create a mental roadmap. Another point I'll just throw in is that we don't remember what we heard. We remember how we remember what we heard. In other words, you have to make copies of copies. So at the end of the day, when the Rebbe would speak after this talk, there would be a niggin. I would review the whole thing in my mind from beginning to end. I would even number. I say he spoke about 54 points, and I would number them. So later I could say, I'm missing 2-3 points. And then I kept on reviewing it until Shabbos or Yom Tov was over. So because you remember what you remembered. And the more copies you make of it, so to speak, in your mind, the better you'll remember. If you just hear it and listen to it and you don't do that review, by the time a few hours pass, a lot has faded. Not entirely, but a lot has faded.
I know we could stay on this for hours, but there's so many more topics we want to get to with you.
Nachi, let me ask you a question. Do you ever try opening like pills and it's just so hard to open, that twisty, like you don't know if you should push down or like it's just so difficult and you're like, I don't know if I need to take the medication anyways. Does that ever happen to you?
I mean, it makes sense that it happened to you because that's why they put a child lock on it. But I think since I turned 13, I kind of know how to open them. But tell us more, Yaakov.
So some of us adults have this issue, and there's this revolutionary thing called pill packs where the pharmacy that you trust, they put in whatever medication you need into the pill pack. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Shabbos, depending on how you call it. They delegate for you those pill packs already. And could you guess which pharmacy actually does this for you?
Well, not ZBS.
Not ZBS, but maybe they do. I don't know. Well, ZBS is a fake pharmacy that we made up, but AMR Pharmacy does. They're the real deal. They do this for you, and they do so much more for you.
Because AMR stands for another meaningful result.
Ooh.
And that's what it is. You taking your pills, another meaningful result. And that's why you guys should go ahead and call them and get on the team. It's a big fam. It's a big team. We're all bleeding AMR. We're bleeding red for them.
I don't like the bleeding AMR thing, but go on with it.
We don't, Sure, let's just go with it. We bleed AMR. But guys, give them a call at 848-22. I forgot the number.
848-222-1110. Are you kidding?
Oh, there it is. That's it. I must have not taken my pills. 848-222-1110. And go ahead and check out their website, amrpharmrx.com. A pharmacy of the future is here for you today. Give them a call.
So I want to move along to the Meaningful Life Center, meaningfullife.com, right?
Right. Which was a name we share in common.
Meaningful. Yeah, Meaningful Minute, Meaningful People, Meaningful Life Center.
Meaningful people.
So at what point did you start that? Was there a dire need that you saw, or it came more organically?
It was a need. As I mentioned, so maybe this is a good segue. So I did this work of Chayzer and Maniach from 76 till 92. 1992, the Rebbe had a stroke. 2 years later, a little more than 2 years, passed away on the Gimel Tammuz, 3rd of Tammuz. So besides the sad and tragedy and the grief, I was also out of a job. Not that anyone mattered to anybody, but I was, because that's what I did. I was completely immersed. And I remember I had to rethink my life. I was at that point in 1994. I was 37, 38 years old. And I had to rethink, what am I going to do with my life? And I was trained. I had plenty of resources. And then I realized, I had an epiphany. I realized, what do you mean? Of course, what you need to do is take all that you've learned and all that you've absorbed and all that, basically Torah. I was blessed with the skill of communication, and use it now to present it to people.
Right.
And I was drawn to present it on a global scale. So the first thing that came to mind was, you need to write a book. You know how many people you say to me, oh, Judaism, so brilliant, Judaism, Jews are so smart. You have a book that expresses Jewish wisdom in a way that a secular person can read, and there weren't many that you could point to. So that's what I decided to do, through the lens of the Rebbe. But the Rebbe, remember, is a Talmud Chacham in the chain that goes back to his Rebbe and to his Rebbe all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, Ish Mepi Ish. So what I did was, in a very sense of urgency, I saw that need, that to present in a world that's very confused and has a lot of different voices, and people are emotionally and intellectually challenged in so many ways because they don't have a way of life. I felt that the key thing here is to communicate the universal wisdom of Torah to all people, to all backgrounds. Most people have issues with God, with religion. So I didn't write a religious book. I wrote a book that is really about life. What I did was I asked people from all backgrounds and all ages and all religions or no religion, what are the 30 most important topics in your life? I don't mean right now, throughout your life. Everybody answers the same thing, and I wrote a chapter for each one of them: body and soul, birth, childhood, education, youth, love, marriage, intimacy.
And these are all based on the teachings of the Rebbe.
Yeah, but the teachings of the Rebbe are the teachings of Torah. Like many people read this book, they say, why is the Rebbe? This is like wisdom from Pirkei Avos or from the... I said, well, it's true. Well, the Rebbe didn't create his own wisdom. He ultimately was the Rebbe's key thing was not creating new Torah. It was about taking Torah and applying it to the 20th century language with the challenges of our time that we're all facing. So it's deeply I would call like a psychological, spiritual application of Torah ideas. So if you read it and you didn't know it said the wisdom of the Rebbe, you'd think this is, great. Some people wouldn't even know it's Torah because it has a certain element. But basically I said was, what do you think? The Jews over the years, they didn't just focus on halacha of how you bake a matzah or how you turn a chicken over your head. They focused also on the wisdom of life, chachmas hachayim, how you run a healthy family, how you deal with challenges. What do you do when there's difficulties? Look at the Jews that came out of the Holocaust. How did they deal with that? So even Viktor Frankl's Man's Search of Meaning is really based, he was not a Torah person, but the ideas are Torah-based ideas. That purpose in life gives you that extra edge. And how did the Jews, when it says in the Pasuk in Shmos, that the Jews, the more kashayano esam ken yirbu v'chen yifritz, as they were afflicted and oppressed, the more they flourished and thrived. How did they take affliction and pain, turn it into growth. It's like the biggest question in therapy and psychology today. And if you can take it and find it in 3,500 years of wisdom, starting from Avram Avinu, it's really even more than that, but that you got yourself a real formula. So that was my goal. And thank God, a major publisher picked up the book, which was the key to it all. You can have the greatest book if you don't have distribution. So William Morrow had a very good agent. It was meant from above. It wasn't because the book happens to be, I believe, a good book, but it was because they felt the need. So within the Rebbe's passed in 1994, for the first yard site, the book was out already.
And obviously today this book has sold nearly 500,000 copies.
Right.
But at that time, in 95, 96, 97, did this book catapult your new venture, your new career?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, it catapulted to the point, I like to put it this way, success preceded infrastructure. Let's put it that way. The book was out. It was a big hit. I was being sent by the publisher. They sent me on a book tour. So I literally went, they first started 20 cities. I went to 90 cities in the United States. Barnes and Nobles. Then there was a chain called Borders, independent bookstores.
I'm old enough to remember Borders. I remember Borders.
Barnes and Noble.
And I
it's like Amazon, but a store.
Yeah, and it created a surge of interest.
Mm-hmm.
It was a mazel that I put an email address in there. I didn't even know what an email address was, but I remember Olav Hashem, Rabbi Kazin, the founder of Chabad.org, said to me, "You must put an email address." I said, "What's an email address?" He says, "An electronic mail." I said, "I have enough garbage coming my way. I don't need more." He said, "No, this is the future."
Wow.
The book was so successful, but no, really, there was no infrastructure for them to go to get more.
Oh, so thank God I got the emails.
Okay.
So I had thousands of emails, and I began writing a weekly column that would go out by email. There was no social media. There was nothing. There was no YouTube. I mean, none of that existed.
Right.
And that created a connection, and that, in a sense, spawned the Meaningful Life Center in around 1998.
It's all happened so quick.
Yeah, very quick, because there was a demand.
Right.
The book created tremendous interest. I got thousands of letters from all over, Jews and non-Jews, all backgrounds.
And they sent you on tour to 90 cities. I heard you were maybe in a Barnes and Noble in Kentucky.
Yeah, of course.
And
you know that story? Okay.
Well, you're about to tell me.
I'll tell it to you. That's a funny story. I had so many crazy stories, because in a Barnes and Noble, it's not a Chabad house, it's not a JCC, it's not a shul. So you meet people who would probably never come to a religious
They
environment.
just love, books.
Or they come for a coffee, or they're coming to buy an auto repair manual, and I happen to be speaking.
So which city is this in? This story.
This story is in Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay.
So there's a independent bookstore called Joseph Beth.
Mm-hmm.
They have two branches, one in Cincinnati and one in Lexington, Kentucky. Now, I don't know if you like trivia. It's I think there's a website called uselessinformation.com. So here's a piece of useless information. The Cincinnati airport happens to be in Lexington, Kentucky. In Kentucky. I don't know Lexington, Kentucky. Yeah, I don't know if that's relevant. But I mean, you never know when this may be important.
There's someone in Kentucky listening. They'll be like, "Oh my gosh, he knows it."
Or you may be on some of these millionaire shows, and they say, "Where's the Cincinnati airport?" Kentucky.
There you go.
Cincinnati's in Ohio, southern Ohio.
Final
I
answer.
spoke at Joseph Beth, and the other store I didn't speak at, but I was driven. It was an hour south to Lexington, and there you go to sign books. They give you books, and you sign them. They put a label, autographed by the author. It makes the book a little more valuable, a little more intriguing. You get the author's signature. So I come, and I go to the front desk, and I say my name is, I didn't say my name, sorry. The name of my book is Toward a Meaningful Life. The woman at the desk says, "Oh, yeah, you're scheduled to come to sign these books." But then she looks it up, and she suddenly turns pale and is like very disturbed. I had no clue why. And then I hear she gets on the phone to the manager upstairs, and she says, she whispers, I shouldn't hear, but I did hear. She says, "Rabbi Schneerson is back."
He's back.
Yeah.
What does that mean, he's back?
Well, she clearly wasn't Jewish.
Right.
She was a believer. So she, because the name, especially in the early editions, the name was larger than my name.
Okay.
So she saw the Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson.
Wow.
So she thought,
And you went along with it.
I decided, you know what, how often are you going to have the opportunity to play Rebbe?
Right.
So I said, okay. The woman comes down from upstairs, and they're both catering. You need a coffee, Rabbi? We can call the media. Tell us whatever you need. They were like really extra nice. Like this was like a big thing. After a minute or two, obviously, I felt bad. I said, I must apologize. I'm not Rabbi Schneerson. I worked for Rabbi Schneerson. I'm Simon Jacobson. And they were visibly disappointed. But I always tell the story without commentary. You can then, everybody will have their, so there's no agenda here. But this is one of many interesting stories that happened. I have many interesting. I remember a priest in Alaska who was a Catholic minister, a Catholic Galach, who said he loved the book. And he said to me at the time, he said, and it's especially intriguing to me because it reminds me of my Jewish roots. So I said, Jewish roots? He said, yes. I said, whose roots? He says, his mother was Jewish. So, I didn't want to drop the whole thing on him. Like right there was a lot of people around.
Chabad in you was just like, well.
So did you put on phylacteries?
I don't know if it was the
today?
Chabad in me.
It's Yid in you.
Yid, or maybe my humanitarian side. Who knows, right?
I like that.
Yeah. So I said to him, maybe you should explore a little more because I didn't know the details. I didn't want to.
Now today he's the
So we
Rosh
stayed
Yeshiva.
in contact. As a matter of fact, I put him in touch with one of my editors who grew up in a Catholic home, 2 Jewish parents who ended up converting to Catholicism. His name today is famous, Stephen Dubner, the co-author of Freakonomics. So if you look in my book, you'll see he was a young journalist at the time. I hired him to help me edit the book.
Wow.
And
I read Freakonomics.
So his parents, he wrote a book called Turbulent Souls about his own life. He grew up the youngest of 8 children to 2 parents. One was a Borough Park Jew, and his mother was also Jewish. They converted to Catholicism in the 50s. It's like a Baal Shem Tov story. And he reclaimed his Judaism. I mean, he's more of a secular Jew, but he still considers himself a Jew. I remember I went to the bris of his oldest son. He named his son David. David is the name of his father. That's another story. I mean, I can tell you the bizarre journeys that I went on because here I grew up, in Crown Heights, yeshiva system. I was not intimidated because I always felt myself as open-minded and I was able to communicate. It wasn't like I had to learn a sprach, a language, how to speak to people like that. Like take religious Jews, many of them, even if they're intelligent, don't know how to speak to someone that's not them except about business.
Right.
And here I was speaking about ideas. But yet, it was suddenly thrust in a whole new environment, which I loved. I thrived on that because it was very challenging for me. It was like you really see the test of something that's real when you put it into an environment that's not your own. Now, if you go to your own shul, that just reinforces your ideas, which can include also your stereotypes and prejudices. You go to a new shul, and suddenly come in. Not everybody likes to do that. It's not their club. So here I was in a new environment, and it really forced me to dig deeper to present an idea on its own merit, not because we wear the same yarmulke or we wear a yarmulke altogether.
Right.
So it was based not on cultural commonality, but on life commonality. Let's talk about children and their needs. Let's talk about anxiety. Let's talk about wealth, about health, etc., etc. And that's the structure of the book. So that we could also speak hours on this if you like.
It seems like meaningful.
What should I tell you? I have a very rich life, and I feel blessed. I feel humbled by it. I'm like a bridge between the 2 worlds, the very Torah world and the very secular world. It's only actually recently that I became more involved in the Jewish frum world a bit more, just in the last years because of the need and just whatever.
So let's talk about,
we have our challenges.
let's discuss that need for a second, I guess, in the frum world. You deal with a lot.
Yes, that's true, especially since COVID. It's been nonstop.
What's that? What are the issues that you are dealing with, and what do you think is the root of them?
Speak specifically in the frum world?
Yeah.
Interesting thing, which maybe not everybody likes to hear, is that humans are humans. What the frum world struggles with, many times the secular world struggles with as well.
Right.
It just may take on a different shape. And there are, of course, unique things to the frum world. I mean, first of all, there's an expression they use, ein bayis b'lo mes. There's no family today in the frum world, almost no family, that doesn't have some challenge with a child or several children. It could be mental health issues. It can be alienation. It can be abuse and molestation. This is a serious issue today. It's only recently come to the surface a bit. And still, there's a lot of resistance because people don't want to go there. It's easier to push it under the carpet. It's our own business. Don't bring anybody else. And, we've all heard this.
Yeah.
I have to say, I don't know if you're aware of this, but around 10 years ago, I met one of my school friends, yeshiva, and he was, it was so sad. It's like I could see he blew his whole mind out with drugs. He had that hollow look in his eyes. He was one of the best guys. I loved the guy. He was like refined. He was a Talmud Chacham. I thought he'd be like the best. And he's completely, and he was hurt in many ways. He was abused. So I decided to write an article, my weekly column. I wrote about it. And I can't tell you how much feedback I got. So I began writing about child abuse. And I remember the guy from Voss is Nice called me. I don't even know if anyone knows who's the guy on top. He's like the Wizard of Oz or something. He's like a secret character. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. And he calls me, he says to me, I'm really following your reading, and can you help me? People write to me about all kinds of abuse, what I should publish, what I shouldn't. This was 10 years ago. It was before the became, I don't say fashionable, but
right, mental health awareness became more popular.
Yeah, popular and also less taboo.
Right.
Less taboo, and people talking out more about their own lives, and it still disturbs many, as we know. So I told him, look, I'm not going to be a Rav and a posek here to tell you what to publish, not to publish. Is it Lashon Hara? Is it, Masira, etc.? But I will write the criteria that you can go to any Rav. I said, the Rabbanim, the problem is they don't know the severity of abuse. They think it's like, someone gave you a slap, get over it. But it's not true. There's a din called a reidiv. A reidiv means someone who's running with a knife in the street, and he's a danger. There's no Lashon Hara issue there,
right? Or
going to the police. That's ridiculous. It's Pekuach Nefesh. So I wrote, and then he published, and then became. So I was probably one of the first, if not the first, to really start writing about it in the frum world.
Was it hard for you to do that because it was taboo, or
no? It wasn't hard at all because I'm not afraid of the taboo. I just wanted to be
your reputation was not really. You weren't worried about your reputation in the frum world.
No, also I didn't go to badmouth anyone. I didn't.
Right.
But ultimately you're delving into a topic that people want to stay
So
away
no,
from.
I got plenty of calls, and people at that point, I'm pretty respected. I have the credentials. I'm not some type of upstart or some maverick trying to make a name for himself.
Right.
I wasn't doing it sensationally. I wrote from my heart.
Right. Okay.
And I wrote it in that way. The truth is, I got a little flack, but it was nothing compared to the positive. Mm-hmm. I remember then Seawald called me. That's the Jewish Community Watch.
Yeah.
He wanted me to be on the board. I said, look, I wasn't abused. I don't have your anger. I'm not part of the lynch mob, the vigilantes, even though I understand your anger and so on. But I'm happy to advise, but I can't be, because I need to be, I'm not becoming a party here to it.
Right.
So it's a whole parsha. The reason I'm mentioning it, you asked issues. So I personally believe we have a Torah. The Torah talks about things, and it says what you should speak about, what you shouldn't speak about. Where does it say in the Torah that you put things under a carpet? If someone shows me a halacha like that, then we can argue about it. It was because of their comfort zone. Schools, families, communities, parents, they don't want to expose that I may be guilty of something. We all understand. I remember a rabbi telling me, you're talking about something that is very disturbing, because I said, why? Let's just root out all the bad stuff, apples, and we'll have he says, well, some of those bad apples are in the highest positions. And I'm afraid if it all gets exposed, the biggest will fall.
You got to start from scratch.
So I said, you know something? What does the Torah say about that? What does the Torah say? Maybe they shouldn't be the biggest. Maybe they should resign. Maybe give them a respectable way to save face and give them a retirement. I mean, that was the tone of it. And we're going into a heavy thing here, but I want to go back and I say, so I felt that because I have both sides, I'm not looking like, and there are people probably that are ex-religious and very angry. And they come back and they want to sue and they want to really hurt people who hurt them. I'm not coming from that place at all. So I wasn't coming from anger. I was calling. To me, it was mostly this issue. Our most precious commodity are children. They're vulnerable, defenseless, impressionable. If we don't protect our children, in the words of the Gemara, Al tigu b'mishichei, who's going to protect them? To me, that's the worst possible crime. We have a lot of averis, but not protecting young children, no. That to me, I don't care how big of a tzaddik you are. You don't do that, that's generational. So that's what bothered me a lot, and I voiced it, and thank God things have gotten better. There's more talk about it. Doesn't solve all the problems, but it's a deterrent. People don't want the light shining. It's like a burglar alarm. It doesn't guarantee no theft. But trust me, in schools and camps, abuse has gone down because they don't want to be caught. That's the
Right.
problem. Not because they became great people. So that was one. Talking about the frum world, I think the frum world has to deal with this big reckoning. Many people think that if you hide behind religion, and I'm a frum Jew, kasher, Shabbos, my garments, I'm already, everything is fine. The frum world has to come to terms that no, you can be a very emotionally unhealthy even if you're the most religious person. And I'll say something which I know may shock some people. I find that dysfunctional people who are religious are usually more dysfunctional than those that are not religious.
Because
the religion becomes their like escape. What do you mean? I'm going to keep Shabbos. And they actually use Shabbos as part of their dysfunctionality to hurt people. So what Yiddishkeit has to come to terms is what the Gemara in Brachos says. There's agam v'apu machtarte rachmana karya. That the Ganav, before he goes out to steal, he prays to God to succeed. That's insanity. When God said, "Lo signev, don't steal," it's like going to the policeman and says, "I need you to help me steal." You want to ignore God is one thing, but so Chassidus explains what this type of dissonance. Where does it come from? It says because amunah could be makif. It's a language expression of Chassidus. What does makif mean? It's detached. It's not integrated. We all have that. There are things you believe in, but are not necessarily internalized. So a lot of Yiddishkeit can be. You can do it mechanically and by rote, and because you grew up with it culturally, but it's not what you say in Yiddish, Eizgearbeit. You didn't work on it. You didn't internalize. You didn't become more refined human being. That, in a nutshell, in my opinion, lies at the root of a lot of issues, which includes how do we deal with children that are perhaps challenging? How many parents try to impose the Yiddishkeit on their children, in turn hurt them? Mm-hmm. And then the children rebel. And at one point, they're very resentful, You find your child reading a book you don't like. What do? So many become very disciplinary. You demoralize the child. You break the child. Is that a healthy approach?
Well, that's not their goal. They're just trying to. They're probably,
Yeah, but they may be going by their instinct, but it may not be the healthiest
Right.
approach.
It's not about the desire. It's
if you
about the
explain it to
impact.
them in terms you said it, then obviously they'll know it's not the right decision.
But you know what? That's true for healthier parents, but there's some people that are trapped in their own approach. And they think, no, if my child does something, I will throw them out of the house.
Do they realize that they don't realize?
They say some people know they don't know, some people don't know they don't know. I don't think there's a rule. I deal with many, many, many people. There's no rule. It all comes down to how healthy you are as a parent. Some people cannot hear. They can't hear. I said, my child is sitting in a room with the internet on Shabbos. So I said, so what do you want to do? He says, I'm going to throw him out next week. So I said, where are you going to throw him out? He's going to go to the street, and then what? He's going to find another father, another mother. He needs a father and a mother now more than ever. But I can't accept it. It's not my standards. I own this house. I pay the rent. I feed him. So I say, but he's your child. He's a piece of you. He's a part of you. Who else? It's not that simple. I don't have a black and white, but it's not. There's the extreme people say, ignore everything. I'm not suggesting compromising standards. I don't think that's always the case. I'm not necessarily a believer of love them unconditionally no matter what. Yes, sometimes if all else fails, that comes down to it. But you also have to learn to be a better parent. I want to make it clear, I'm not here to criticize any frum person or any individual. Right. We're talking, to ourselves as well.
Absolutely. Well, what are some, like, in your experience in counseling and just talking to so many people, what are some do-nots that are just hard to come back from in relationships? It could be a parent, it could be a spouse.
We'll learn from Moshe Rabbeinu. The biggest do-not is never, ever cut off entirely. The Jews built an Egel Hazav. That was bad, right? Yareg Val Yaver.
Not the best decision.
Avodah Zarah. Yeah. You're supposed to die. It's one of the three things you're supposed to. 39 days after they heard Lo Yilecha, don't have false gods, they built a false god. So they were completely responsible. It wasn't like, we misunderstood, I didn't know. There was none of that. It was bemazed. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu, you would think that he wasn't there. It wasn't his fault. But he refuses to cut off from these people. He refuses to accept what God says. Start with a new nation. What does he do? He marches back up on he breaks the luchas and he reprimands them and they get what they deserve. But he goes up back on Har Sinai and mountain and says, I will not give up on these people. And I don't want you, God, to give up either. And it takes him 80 days. I always say it takes 40 days to receive the Torah. It takes 80 days to get forgiveness. Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. Why? Because Salachti Kidvarecha. We say right after Kol Nidre, because Moshe, a man, prevailed over God. That means 80 days God was saying no. The middle 40 days, we don't really, it was definitely rejection. But he finally prevailed. What does that tell you? Because he was saying to Hashem, yes, the people did a terrible thing. They're accountable. But they're your people. They're your children. And no matter what, that will never change. So now they have to respond and do tshuva and do what they have to do, but you also have to allow a door open for tshuva. I saw once a Reishis Chochmah writes, beautiful thing, he says, a story with Elisha ben Avuya, Acher, who was like that. He, an apostate, he knew God, he saw the greatest things, and then he became an unbeliever. The story of the Rab Meir and the horse, I don't want to go through the whole details, but basically he spit God in his face. And then the Bas Kol came out that everybody can do tshuva. Everybody can do tshuva except Acher. So the Reishis Chochmah writes this interesting statement. He says, well, Acher, of course, didn't do tshuva. He died. Even Gehenim didn't want him, as the Gemara explains. Took a whole prayer. Rabbi Yehuda had to pray that the Gehenim should accept him. That's how he was like, so the Reishis Chochmah says that when he came up to heaven, the Hashem said to him, you knew, of all people, you knew that you could always do tshuva. He says, but you said, so the Eibishter says to him, but you know the din. Everything the owner tells you to do, this is a halacha. If you're invited as a guest to someone's home, everything the host tells you to do, you're supposed to do, except if he tells you to leave. So there's no such thing as leave. You should have knocked down the door. That's what the Reish. So my thing, I think the worst possible thing is total cutoff. It may be difficult for some, but never ever cut off from your child, no matter what happens. Even if your child, Rahman al-Islam, is a murderer in prison, it's still your child. And the basic belief in Judaism is that the neshama is always pure. Afal pi shachata Yisrael. And I once was speaking to a very big Kanoi, a zealot from Meir Sharim. He needed something from me, so we ended up speaking. And I said and he's very anti-secular, anti-chilonim, the secular, he talks about them in the worst possible way. So I said, can I ask you, you're a Rav, you're a Pesach, and he has all the Shemainu Begadim, he's dressed up with the payas, everything is Shtreimel, on Shabbos. I said to him, let me ask you a shaila. If someone who never davened and never kept any mitzvahs, even that may not even be possible, but let's say, they come to you and they ask you, tomorrow morning they want to daven. Should they say the tefillah, neshama shenesata bi tahirihi, or not? He looks at me. He says, I remember he smiles. He says, you're a chacham, huh? So I said, so what's the answer? He says, you know the answer. How could I tell them not to say it? It's a tefillah. So I said, are they saying a sheker? He says, no. So I said, so what does that mean? The neshama is tahira. You and I don't decide if a soul is pure. God decides. That doesn't mean ata barasa ati yitzar. Doesn't mean the neshama can't be soiled. Doesn't mean the neshama can't be concealed. A neshama could also end up being in a body that you end up doing big crimes. But the neshama is never lost. There's no such thing as lost neshama. I mean, of course, people will say, what about karas and what about this? That's discussions in many Sfarim. But you're talking about Atzelim Elikim. Can Atzelim Elikim, even a person hanging, the Pasuk says, take him down because it's Atzelim Elikim. Even he's hanging for a punishment. So I think that is something that the whole Frum world, the whole Jewish world, I think has to appreciate that there's a God here. God runs the world, not rabbis and not Frum Jews and not your own beliefs. There's a Eibishter through Torah runs this world. And I think if we all sublimated or subjugated ourselves to that, and it's not about your comfort zone. And if the Eibishter wants, you do things the way Hashem wants. He doesn't want you to go to shul for whatever reason because of COVID. That's up to God. It's not up to you. If HaTorah and Halacha says that means Hashem says He wants you on a desert island on Rosh Hashanah, not in a shul. So that's God's plan.
So I know we're heavy into the interview, but something I want to clarify is what exactly is the Meaningful Life Center? I think it was NBC. I mean, you were on a lot of really popular programs. called the program Spiritual Starbucks. I'm not even sure what
Yeah,
that means. So what is Meaningful Life Center?
Okay, good.
What's its
And now
mission?
I'm on one of the biggest shows of all, Meaningful People.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Meaningful Life Center and Meaningful People.
Yeah,
Meaningful Minute. I mean, come on, we can.
Listen, we saw NBC. We're like, you know what? Fine, let's.
Okay, good.
A lot of meaningfulness here.
Yeah. It reminded me, in those early years, I did a radio show. It was called the show for skeptics and seekers, Torah Meaningful Life. The show for every Sunday, 6 to 7 p.m. I was on WEVD. Then it became a sports show. So I remember one Sunday was Super Bowl. And so I opened the show saying, I apologize to the NFL for taking away some of their audience. From my show. Anyway. Great question. Meaningful Life Center began as being a center that offered programs and classes and life skills that are based on the universal teachings of Torah, applying it to people's personal lives. Whether it's how to find a good, healthy soulmate, how to deal with children, how to deal with your own demons, how to use your wealth, how to deal with anxiety, that type of thing. Because it was like early on, at that point, technology was not what it was. So most of it was really through live classes and programs that I did in different places, mostly in the Upper West Side at the time. I was in the Boyaner Shtibel, which is up, on 82nd and West End. I was in Yeshiva Ktana on 89th and Riverside, different places. And that created a following. And I began to offer more services and start building a team. I started raising money and became a center in the sense where people were coming to for either classes or programs. We did retreats, weekend retreats. We were known for then doing camping retreats, actually, which were pretty wild. Some people still remember them. They're very memorable. We were, brave the elements. The real thing wasn't a 5-star hotel. With tents and all the works, outdoor catering. And then as it evolved and technology became more prominent, we began using that. YouTube started doing videos. So I'm like on there from the earliest when it began, when YouTube first began. It was like for us a miracle because the amount of money you have to spend to get a video, even stored would be, and now it's just all free. I have maybe close to 10,000 videos probably up on YouTube.
And you have
free.
You have millions of views on your
No, it's not free in certain ways, but I mean to say to store videos.
Sure, yeah, I understand.
And the distribution became so simple. And then social media emerged. So we've been evolving. Basically, as they say, the medium is the message. We use the mediums and the platforms to continue distributing this message and just created a following that just continued to grow. Now, we had a space in the city, which was like the center, but to ignore technology, I mean, we have people listening from New Zealand or from Croatia, whatever it may be, So now it's become mostly online, especially. So when COVID came, I couldn't even do local programs. Right. But I was all set up. I already have a built-in studio, and I didn't have to scramble or anything.
You didn't miss a beat.
You even have when people aren't listening to this live, but in 8 minutes you're premiering on YouTube.
Yeah, some people say that. 1 second, I'm seeing you in 2 places. So I say I have a double and a triple. I have doubles. To be careful. So it grew. So the center became why it was called the Spiritual Starbucks, because someone who attended was actually a writer for the New York Times. And he liked the idea, because I told him, I said, one of my dreams is to create there's a thing called a third space. There's your home, there's your workplace. So Barnes & Noble actually conceived of the idea that we would, of these big places, a lot of real estate. There was a big argument because spending so much money, and most people can just come and sit on a couch and sleep and not buy a book. But their idea is we're going to create a social setting. Like you're hanging out there, you come with a friend. Starbucks, obviously mastered that.
Right.
That it wasn't about buying the coffee, it was about an environment. So I said, maybe we can create a spiritual third space, not just for a coffee and a book, but also with spiritual messages and ideas and music. So I conceived of this idea, I shared it with this journalist, and he wrote Spiritual Starbucks. He grabbed the idea. Now, it didn't come to fruition yet. My dream is to do it. Actually, I want to do it in West Village. I already put my eyes on a area,
like a spot that people could come in.
It would be like a spot you come in, you can get yourself a coffee, nice music, books, and you could hang around. There'll be a program in the evening, maybe have authors speak. Very eclectic mix of different talents. I like the idea of cross-pollination between physics and spirituality and Torah, Chassidus, just create a very cool vibe.
It's such a forward idea.
Yeah, and I would. New York is the great place to test it. Post COVID, we'll see what happens. Then I thought if it really works, this can become something maybe multi-city.
It's very cool.
Yeah, I think it would work because it would give people in a place that you don't have to commit to. You just come, and it should be the vibe has to be vibe. It can't not look like a stark classroom. It has to be. It has to have that chic, cool vibe, basically.
Right.
Vibe,
Like feel like a WeWorks or like a Starbucks, exactly what you're saying.
And you have programs. Now, people don't have to come to the programs, or they could come to the programs. It'd be like that type of thing. And I would probably bring different people, maybe even have a Thursday night. We would call chavrusa. I wouldn't call it chavrusa. A Thursday night, cross conference. You bring someone a little more scholarly. I mean, the potential is really
very cool.
infinite.
I'm going to ask you a question. What's truly on your mind and in your heart, and what do you think is in the minds and the hearts of specifically young people?
COVID has changed things, just for the record, as you probably know.
Yeah, of course.
Because a year ago, I was speaking to a group of public school children across the country. It was like a online big Zoom, so a few thousand people. And I asked them this question. I said, give me the 3 top things in your life. And this was in May 2020. And they said, our families, relationships, love, our values. Now, I said, what would you have answered in January 2020? So they answered very bluntly. They said, boys, girls, sex, sexuality, sports, games, texting, the newest technologies. So I said, what changed? Everyone knows what changed. Because suddenly when your security blankets and comfort zones are stripped away from you, you're left with is what's deeper. Now, some people don't have anything to turn to, so they get very frustrated. And some people realize that's a good opportunity. So my answer to that, I know, as we all know, let's be realistic. Young people are distracted and seduced by everything that comes their way. You send somebody a short little YouTube video or Instagram, that's what they're going to look at. They're not going to look, you send them, let me share with you a Dvar Torah, or that's not even called Dvar Torah. Let me share with you some meaningful insight into life. And then they have a video of some pop star, whatever, smashing a pumpkin. What are they going to watch? We understand that. We're not naive. So the question that I think about a lot is, how do you compete with I don't know, it's called nonsense, but you're competing with like instant gratification and like almost a social environment. So COVID, with all its negative part and the health issues and unfortunately deaths and loss, but the positive side has been definitely a wake-up call. I wish I had the resources, but I would have used this, and I'm still thinking of ways to do it. How do you reach a critical mass and say, the world has been disrupted, the world as we know it. Can we turn it into some type of, let's not call it spiritual awakening, awakening of deeper purpose or
Is that
something.
possible in the world that we live in?
I think, you know how?
Yeah.
If you got Hollywood stars, sports stars, the people who have millions of followers,
But
The guy
says
who runs
they're-
if they would come
yeah.
and give a meaningful minute.
But who says they're holding there themselves? I mean, some
No,
of the
but no,
biggest
but-
perpetrators of what you're saying are Hollywood
No,
stars.
I agree. You have to find the low-hanging fruit. There are those
Okay.
people like, let's say from U2,
Bono?
Bono. He's socially conscious. There are those.
Yeah, but like, I don't know, not to get all political.
Okay,
but
maybe I'm a little idealistic.
I'm challenging because
No, it's a good challenge. I agree.
Because we live in cancel culture, and whether we like it or not, there's a right and there's a left, and I feel like this is a great idea and concept, but it seems like in the days that we live in right now, that anything that has to do with religion or really deep, meaningful things are canceled. It's just.
I agree. So, first of all, let's just get rid of the word religion and any stereotypical word, because that will be a turnoff for sure.
What's a word that's not
Spiritual?
That's not ruined.
Or spiritual?
Spiritual for some people,
Overused?
but spiritual also for young people, not necessarily. For a person in the 30s and 40s, spiritual is fine because they identify with that.
okay?
This is one of the great challenges. In my own work, we always identify who's the low-hanging fruit. If you had, let's say, $100,000, or for that matter, $1 million, who would you target would be most likely to respond to a meaningful message? Let's put it that way. So usually comes down to 2 categories. Either natural seekers, people who are naturally inclined toward meaning, they read those type of books, they go to, or people who have suffered. people in pain are far more vulnerable and more receptive. Like people in recovery are going to be much more open to spirituality because life didn't work out for them. But if someone has a comfortable life and everything is going well, as like a spoiled, what I call sugar daddy or something like that, obviously you don't have a very easy target here. So there's a few ways you could think about it. That maybe if you look at the low-hanging fruit and you reach enough influencers on that level, maybe then it can have a ripple effect, like anything does, even to people who are superficial or what we're calling like distracted, or you call the cancel culture. That's one way of thinking. Another way of thinking, can you reach the youth on their terms? Can you do something that's entertaining enough to get their attention, but also has some meaning smuggled in there? Not manipulation.
Right.
Like let's say you did a great Hollywood film that wasn't just, a bubblegum film, but a film that had a message. There were films like that. So you could technically plan something like that.
I think this podcast, if I'm allowed to even say, this podcast is a little like that because, we try to keep this fresh and entertaining and interesting, but also we're not just yapping away here. We're trying to bring out Torah concepts and
this is an excellent conversation. I'll be honest with you. It's good we're talking about it, but it would require, I would say, a good brainstorm meeting between like-minded, because this is not a quick fix.
No.
I'm not going to come. I have many ideas. Like anything has to be tested. And interesting. I can share some. For example, a few years ago, someone came up with an idea in one of our brainstorm that we should do a program called I Inspire. Get a crew of 2 people, a cameraman and an interviewer, and go to all the campuses in the country and say, what inspires you? And it could be nonsense. And then just post all these little videos.
Right.
Like create a user-generated content, and you never know what's going to come out of it. I'm sure some meaningful things.
There's on one of the social media platforms, there's someone who goes to people and he asks everyone the same exact question. He says, "Are you happy?" And it's very interesting. A lot of times it's just silly, but a lot of times it leads to very interesting and
let me tell you guys,
answers.
I can tell you this. I love talking about this because the problem I have is not coming with the idea to have people who care enough to want to talk about it.
Right.
Then when you have that, there will be a breakthrough. I can't tell you I have an answer right now, but you put in a room a few people who really care. Tell me one big thing, one big idea that in this world has happened because everybody thought it was great. Did anyone predict Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google?
GameStop.
Or the Wright brothers, an airplane? Someone told you there's going to be a flying ship in the skies? You need a little, what they call Meshuggah Esidov. You need someone who's a little crazy. Steve Jobs said it, that the only ones that change the world are the people who are crazy enough to believe they can.
We see that. We see the people who are, you look at Elon Musk and Bezos. These guys are interesting characters.
I will say this. I always challenge any, especially Jewish audiences and from audience. Where is our Steve Jobs? Where is our, why don't we create a pioneering, revolutionary thing? And most people tell me, no, that's not our way. I said, what do you mean not our way? Didn't Avram Avinu do that? Didn't Moshe Rabbeinu? Obviously, with God's help.
I'm gonna ask you a question. I want you to answer that. Really.
Hold on, wait. I want to challenge that for a second. But I think we do have certain. Okay, not to that extent because we're not global. But yes, you have. When we're airing this, who just passed away, Rabbi Abraham J. Tversky, or Alav Shalom,
a great man,
or Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Alav Shalom,
and Rabbi Steinsaltz. Yeah,
right. So,
no. I listen. I hope it comes across that I'm not sitting here and just criticizing. I'm looking always to reach higher.
Right, like how could we do better? And
these are great men who made big differences.
You're saying we need more.
We need a lot more.
Right.
And interestingly, I don't know if any of them targeted children, young, even though Tversky did great work in strides. He took pioneering strides in helping the movement of helping young people, mental health, and so on. But we need more. Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned all 3 have passed away in the last year.
I know.
So
we need to replenish.
Yeah, right. And I'll tell you something more. I think that there are the individuals, but the Yiddishkeit was always driven by people like that. They become a minority. When you look at in time of Shas, the Rabbi Akivas and the Rabbi Meirs and these were dynamic pioneers that were trendsetters.
Right.
And that's why I started with Avram Avinu and Moshe Rabbeinu. These were greats. What's happened is, unfortunately, what often happens is when a system becomes systemized and bureaucratic, it becomes more conformity-based. We're just going, I'm doing it the way my shul does it. I wear a black yarmulke to my side. This one wears it to the front. This one says this is a Kippur Srugan, that's puzzle. And this one needs a velvet. You get the idea. And everything becomes focused on these externals. And yes, we definitely need new, young spiritual revolutionaries.
And
within the context of Torah. I'm not talking about, the many have gone out of Torah. I'm talking about within Torah.
So we're gonna wrap up this episode. This felt very short, and obviously it's going very long. But I want you to answer this question as quick as possible without really thinking too much about it. If someone called up the Meaningful Life Center tomorrow and said, "Here's $1 million," what's the first thing you would do? Besides for like sing and dance, but like what would you put into play?
I wouldn't sing and dance anymore.
Find $5 million.
I would put into play exactly what we spoke about. I would gather 2-3 people that I respect and say, I have $1 million budget. I don't want to spend it wildly. Obviously you can always just throw it out. I want to create a focused new program that's going to reach a very particular target audience that has sustainable power. How do we turn the million into 10 million and 20 and 30 million? Because it's easy to blow $1 million. That's what I would do.
I love that. So we're going to quickly ask you our last question that we asked.
Rapid fire.
If you could spend an hour with someone who's no longer with us, could be from history, could be from your life, and you have an hour with them, who would you choose?
I'm always very attracted to Acher. What was going on in his mind? Yeah.
Really?
I like these.
That's a first.
Yeah.
It's such a. Do you want to challenge him? You're not scared to?
No, because I have my own skepticism. But
after we'd be like, we have to delete this episode. He met him and it didn't go well.
I would ask him a very important question. I would say to him, that you've become a legend in history, and what did you learn, and what would you tell another person? Because I think sometimes, sometimes from those that have rejected something, you learn the most.
Right.
Obviously, the natural thing I want to be with Moshe Rabbeinu, Avraham Avinu, the Rizal, the Baal Shem Tov, the Rambam, the Rashi. There's great people.
I would say the Rebbe, but you remember everything you said already.
Yeah, and because I'd want to hear, like he knew so much. I mean, it's not the only guy. He asked me to be rapid fire. I gave you my first.
Okay, no, that's great.
I like to think of it. If there was a cocktail party, who would I invite? He would definitely be one of them. Because just to make it a little lebedik, a little more exciting.
That would make it interesting.
613 mitzvahs in the Torah. What's one mitzvah that you connect with more than any other?
Avos Yisrael. Down pat, absolutely. Loving unconditionally another. Because to me, that's the root of everything else.
Sorry for interrupting that. What's the worst advice you have ever received?
Received or given?
Oh, both.
The worst advice. It's a very good one. That's a good one. Well, I can't say it's the worst, but it's definitely up there. When I was told to stop thinking and stop trying to be independent and just go along with the flow.
What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Well, the best advice is to follow your heart and soul, and don't be afraid of anything.
Rabbi Jacobson, thank you so much.
Wait, hold on. I want to plug all your places.
People can go to meaningfullife.com. They can follow you at Meaningful Life Center on Instagram, and you got
Facebook, and you name it, and YouTube. And but meaningfullife.com is the best place because that's everything is there.
Mm-hmm. And this looks like an incredible book. This was written in 1995, and just I'm so impressed with the quality, and I can't wait to delve into this.
And I'll tell you, many people I read it, they tell me, would you change anything? I wouldn't. It's like it became a classic. I referred to it myself.
500,000 copies sold. That's
it was meant to be. It was meant
unreal.
To be.
You should continue with much hatzlacha, and
I want to thank you guys. Great.
Thank you so much
for coming.
I definitely think this conversation needs a part 2 and maybe a part 3. So we hope to see you sometime.
Maybe we'll come to you next time.
We had a very good. I loved it, and I'm happy to do it.
And a big shout out to your son Mendel. Just a big shout out to him. Thank you so much.
Mendel.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Meaningful People Podcast.
MPP. Just go with the shortening of it.
It doesn't hit as well as saying the full thing. But we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you listen to it and you want to watch it and see what Rabbi Jacobson looks like, you can go ahead and just search Meaningful People Podcast on YouTube, and you can see that plus many other episodes.
I apologize for the background noise. I have a rabbit in this room. And we have so many episodes. There's this famous basketball player, Mari Stoudemire, that we got to interview, and as well as many, many other awesome Jews. So go ahead, take a look. And we have a really exciting episode coming out next week, which you'll find out about next week. Until then, I'm Yaakov Linger.
And I'm Remy.
And Remmy's my rabbit. Very good one, Aki. Everyone, don't forget to brush your teeth every day.
And take your rabbit out of your cage here and there. Ciao.